Good evening, witches, warlocks, sorcerers, and adepts, to the newest episode of Knights of the Nephilim podcast, brought to you by my company, Celestial Oddities Radio. As always, I will be your tour guide on this mystic and mysterious journey that we call Magick. My name is Reverend Frater Crow, and I want to thank you for listening in tonight. Whether you are listening live or you've streamed or downloaded this episode after the fact, I do want to thank you for your time in checking us out this evening. And please make sure you click the like, share, and follow buttons from whatever platform you are listening to us from, whether it be iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Deezer, Spreaker, CastBox, Amazon Music, or Google Play. We're on it all, so listen where you feel most comfortable. But by clicking those buttons, it spreads us and moves us up the podcast community rankings, allows more people to discover the show, and the more that we're able to do with the show. Also keeps you in the loop as new shows and new episodes air, and gives you access to our past archives so that you never miss a thing. If you are a fan of the occult, of Left Hand Path, of black magic or Satanism, you will love this show. There's something for absolutely everyone. A lot of great knowledge and gnosis. So make sure you jump through not only this episode, but through past episodes as well. And as I said, we air across absolutely everything. With that being said, I do want to throw something out tonight that I haven't talked about in past episodes, because two listeners recently reached out to me. Some of the platforms are adding their own commercials in on top of the show. This show does already have commercials within it, but they are adding secondary commercials, and they're not doing it at a very good time. I have been told that they're doing double commercials over top of mine, or they're doing it over top of the interview itself. So if you were listening on a platform and you notice that, you might want to jump to one of the larger companies like iTunes or iHeartRadio, something bigger, because the ones that have been mentioned to me were actually platforms that I was not even familiar with. We do air across about 20 different platforms. So, if you listen to something bigger, or you go to our hosting company, which is Spreaker, and that's Spreaker, you can do that through the app or through the .com page of Spreaker.com, and once again, that's Spreaker. That'll allow you to listen to us from our hosting company. Will allow you to also instant message us during the show, and that way you can talk with us, you can ask our guests questions, and you can be a part of the show, which we always, certainly encourage. We do want to thank our sponsors out there, the Talismancer, Limitless Liberation, and Goetic Impressions, for everything that they do for myself and for the show. Tonight we will stop and take segments to talk about those companies specifically, what they make, where you can check them out at, any promotion codes and websites that you can check them out at as well. If you are new to the show, make sure you, spread the word, tell your friends and family about it. It has, like I said, something for absolutely everyone. And if you are into the occult, as I mentioned earlier, our show is an interview/talk show platform that airs 2 to 3 times per month, interviewing great guests in the occult, whether it be occult authors, practitioners, ritual toolmakers, or historians and theologists. We bring them on the show, we pick their brain, find out about who they are, the work that they create, and much, much more. And as I always say, tonight is no different. We have a wonderful guest lined up. And, other than that, we want to thank you for listening, and we'll go ahead and jump right into it. Give me 1 second here, and we are going to... There we go. I'm going to read you a little bit of our guest's bio tonight. She had a very well written, but it was lengthy as well. So what I did is I jumped in and pulled a couple segments out of it, because we always pick our guest's brain and let them tell you more about themselves. So instead of me going too in-depth with it, I'm going to read it from her perspective, and then we'll go ahead and jump into her herself. We have, I'm not sure how familiar you are with Catholic Church, but on certain days they have sometimes or something called the Stations of the Cross. It is a religious ritual. The people that attend read from small books, each passage telling part of the story of how Christ died. During the readings, I can never say this word right, we'll just call it the priest, carries a censer filled with incense as he blesses and cleanses the people in attendance. When I was 15, I was attending, during school hours, this very ceremony. As the priest approached me with the incense, I passed out cold. When I woke up, Sister Xavier was with me, asking if I was okay. They had removed me from the church and brought me back to the school's classroom. This happened during the middle of my 8th grade year. When I arrived home that day, I asked my mother if I could withdraw and go back to public school, and she agreed, and thus began my journey into the occult. I have now been a practicing witch for 14 years, a spiritual medium. I also provide services to the public when paranormal problems arise. Based on my experience in work with the All-Mother, Hecate, I am now the author of my first book, The 10 Most Important Laws for Successful Magic. My book became a #1 new release in Amazon's spiritual reference category within its first 3 weeks. Through the use of my true will, I achieved what I have always wanted, to be a best-selling author, to help the public with paranormal problems, and share my knowledge of the occult with the world. Thank you for reading, and I wish you much love, light, and balance in your life. And that was her words herself. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm very excited to bring on Anassa Rose. How are you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing very well. I'm happy to be here. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing very well as well. I appreciate you coming on tonight and hanging out with us, letting us pick your brain a little bit about your work, who you are, your background, and much, much more.
Of course.
So I always start out traditional. I mean, I like to keep it, as a traditional interview, and start out with, how did you get started in your path? I mean, obviously we talked a little bit about it right there from the section of your bio. Right. But, I believe that there was experiences that you had much prior to that experience in church at 15. You had some paranormal experiences, I believe, even as early as an infant. So why don't you take us and rewind us back a little bit and give us an overview of how your path started in paranormal and the supernatural and what ultimately led you into the occult?
Sure, absolutely. There's one piece of that story that was missed, but I'll get to that in a minute. So pretty early on in my life, there were incidences of things that were pretty scary for a child. So I remember being, probably 2-ish. And this is a strange thing for me. Like, I'm one of those weird people that I kind of remember everything from when I was young. And that's likely due to trauma that I suffered during those years. But when I was 2 years old, my mother had left the person that she was married to and moved my brother and I into it was like a second-story apartment. And in that apartment, there was this spirit of this old lady that I kept seeing all the time. And I remember asking my mom to put a plate on the table for her and set a place so she could eat with us. And I was always talking about this old woman, and she would be in my room every night. And I can still see her even now as I'm thinking about this. She wore a blue dress with these little tiny flowers on it. And I don't know if you've ever seen elderly women, sometimes they wear those knee-high pantyhose way back in the day.
Absolutely.
And she had one of those that was all the way up, and then the other one was kind of half rolled down her calf. And she had these 1970s heeled platform white shoes on her feet, and she wore her hair up on top of her head in a twisty bun with a bobby pin sticking out of it. And ultimately, one night my mom decides to go out with friends or whatever, and she had another one of her friends come and babysit my brother and I. He was younger, obviously, and he was put down, went to sleep, and my friend's mom got completely freaked out because she went into the kitchen to make herself something to drink, and the cupboard door started opening, and she said that there were things flying out of the cupboard, and it scared her so bad that she gathered myself and my brother up, pulled him out of his crib and ran down the stairs. And when my mom got home, she was sitting at the bottom of the stairs, waiting, and just would not go back into my mom's apartment. Well, the next day, my mom took me to see the landlord because she was at this point trying to figure out thinking that I was imagining things beforehand, and now her friend has experienced something. She wanted to know exactly what was happening. And she took me to the landlord, and she asked the landlord, who used to live in the apartment? And he pulled out a picture of the old woman and showed it to my mom. And when I saw the picture, I remember pointing at it going, that's her, that's my friend, And we found out from the landlord that day that she had hung herself in my bedroom closet.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In the apartment.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to get the validation that you knew you were seeing something that others weren't seeing, and then when it was confirmed 100%, it's always a very validating, a moment, an event, especially for a child, because I am someone myself, and I've talked about it on past episodes, who have been seeing spirits of the dead since a very early age, and not everybody has that gift, obviously. So when you see these entities, and you're like, wait a second, like, is there something wrong with me? And then you get validation that, oh no, there was something or someone in the home that did pass away. Same for mine. There was a gentleman that I seen, an older gentleman, full body apparition, the very first time I ever had a paranormal experience, and it was validated by the fact that he did in fact die in the house, and we knew nothing about it. So I am right there with you on it, because that makes you feel like, okay, wait a second, there's something more to this. I'm not crazy, and no one can ever tell me from this point forward that I was wrong. Because we've had guests on before that have had paranormal experiences that they were, made to believe or told that they weren't seeing what they were seeing, they were wrong, don't interact, almost made to feel guilty of it. And I always hated that. Because, you should not made to feel guilty for who you are and what you are. And I think it's a very common bond amongst occultists and practitioners that most of us, from what I've experienced through many conversations, have had ghostly and paranormal experiences as young children. It's a major thing that connects all of us.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that 100%. I have yet to meet an occultist or any person that is deeply into the spiritual paths that all of us are into that has not had experiences as a child in some form. So I definitely believe that that's true, for sure.
I brought up the fact that I think that it happens for a reason, too. It's not just the fact of us having abilities maybe a little bit more tuned in and defined than others. I believe that maybe we are shown these things as children to spark our path into spirituality and into the unknown, because I think once you have that experience, you can't ever go back to thinking how a regular child who had never seen anything would think. You were always somewhat changed, and then it starts to spark your path, and it's ironic that a lot of people end up led into the occult and spirituality. So I think that there is certain reasons, maybe bigger than what we realize, but I believe that is for a reason itself.
I don't doubt that at all, and that actually takes me kind of into my next major life experience that occurred that has led me to kind of where I am now. I do believe what you said, but for me, the reason that I think, well, at least one reason that I think it happens is that we need to remember who we are and where we come from, and the experiences that we have as children start us on that journey of understanding that, this isn't the first time we've been in flesh. Okay. That's my opinion. And that we've probably been here multiple times before.
I'm right there with you on that. I believe we've gone through many, many lives. The same spirit, different vessel, and we're almost given amnesia each time. Start again. Sometimes we can remember fractaled shards of past lives in some cases, but we are wiped clean until ultimately we reach. It's almost like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. You got to live it over and over again until you do it right. And once you reach a certain level of obtained power stored, and you can use that power, you can then either reach a level where you do not have to come back again, or you can become something beyond and serve a greater purpose that's beyond the flesh. So I'm right there with you on that.
Yes, and to add to that, you can also get to a point where you can choose. You won't just become greater or other, for lack of a better word. You can choose whether or not you want to incarnate again or not. And it becomes a choice instead of something that you have to do. And if you would choose to do it, then of course you would also choose your purpose for coming here.
Correct. And I mean, it goes on to a topic that I was actually just talking about this morning in a post that I made last night, that my path is, or what I am aiming for, my ultimate goal is much different than most. Much would want to come back again and continue to learn lifetime after lifetime, because even though some would think that's horrible, some people love life like myself where they would love to keep coming back, although that's not my goal. Mine would ultimately be, after this life, not to be absorbed back into the all, to actually fractal from that and become a daemon itself and forever live in the celestial or ethereal realm and be able to be summoned by others to come back and teach them Gnosis as the daemons have taught me. And I know there's a lot of people that are on that page, but there's also a lot of people that say, why would you ever want to do that? Because then that's eternal. Forever you're going to live as that thing. But that's the path that I have been on for a long, long time. And it actually was a KOTN conversation that we were having, which we'll jump into tonight together. But that's how this whole thing came up, was some Gnosis that was part of Jason Miller's class. I've been following KOTN magic and sorcery for quite some time, but I decided to give his class a go, which he's done a very, very good job on the course he has, which is the Sorcery of Hecate.
Yeah, I've heard good things about his course. I haven't taken it myself, but I've heard some definite positive feedback about it.
I'm an addict of trying out other practitioners' methods, where I've been very successful with my own over the years, and I figure, if the price fits in my budget, that it's not going to make or break me in any way, why wouldn't I throw another practitioner some money to help them out? Plus, I always learn things that I didn't know, because I'm not that arrogant person that says I can't learn anything. I
exactly.
Lesson after lesson, I'm like, well, shit, I never knew that before.
Yep.
And then maybe it changes my practice, where I just switch one small thing out, and all of a sudden I have much better resonance and results. So I always like to hear, different people's styles and things. Jason Miller certainly is a very educated and very good teacher. And then, completely kind of sidetracked, but Bal Cadmon is one of my absolute favorites in the Occult.
I love his work.
Dude's a genius. I think he's the true essence of, he's the true essence of demonic knowledge, because I feel the only way that someone could release as much work as he has done is to truly be, imbued by demonic knowledge, because he has, 30 books roughly, give or take. And then his lessons are the most in-depth lessons I've ever seen. He has the 72 demon names of the Goetia. And it is the most well-rounded, compiled, in-depth lessons I've ever heard anyone give. And I've been through a lot. And I'm like, man, this dude knows his shit.
I haven't taken his classes yet, but I do have several of his books, and they're always books that I cannot put down. As soon as I pick them up, I end up finishing them and taking notes, and my journal ends up full when I'm reading Bal's work. So I think he's an incredible creator.
And the thing is, he knows the backgrounds, too. Like, right now I'm taking one on Egyptology that he's giving. It's just kind of a side one. I've always been fascinated with Egypt, and I'm like, you know what, let's hear what he has to say. And he goes into picking apart the hieroglyphs. He goes into, in the 72 demons of the name, he goes into, like, all of the Hebrew background stemming works of what it meant originally in Gematria and in Hebrew. I mean, to a level of depth that most people's minds start spinning, and they're like, holy shit, like, wow.
Right, but that's extremely important information.
Oh, yeah.
So, like you can spend time reading books that, other occultists write, and you can read, all the UPG that you want in the world. But if you're completely dismissive of anything that is more scholarly, written by people, or those that have really dug in deep and studied the actual, history, and maybe even from an archaeological perspective, gotten down in the dirt and put their hands on the things, I think it's not smart to completely dismiss scholarly work when we're within the realm of occult study. Having that scholarly background and that information to bounce your gnosis and information off of, it acts as basically a good check, not only for yourself, but for other people. And that's what I enjoy about Ball's work the most, is that he's very academic in the way that he presents information. So I definitely appreciate it.
Absolutely, because you can miss out on a lot of those things where he will go into backgrounds where, yes, you might understand the Goetia, but you don't understand Hebrew. And then you could say, well, I don't need to know that. But then when you find out that, wait a second, all of the values of Hebrew letters and words make certain number values, which is gematria, and you start to look at that, and the numbers actually formulate a whole different practice. Yes. And then you start comparing that to the Torah and the Quran, and you start to mix all these books up, and how he connects 4 different religious books of different, theologies, and how all of them have a story behind them that correlates.
Exactly.
You're like, well, this dude just blew my mind.
Yes.
He did that with the Eden story, where he said that if you go back to original Hebrew and look at the story of the Garden of Eden, both God and the serpent, or Satan, if you want to call him that, both numeric values were the exact same value in number in gematria, meaning that God and the devil were the exact same. They were dualistic sides of one another. And that, it blew my mind that you're going back thousands of years and you're like, holy hell, so even back then the original writings were saying God and the devil are one and the same. And it was pretty profound, those little things that you don't hear anywhere else. And I'm like, this dude needs awards because the amount of research he does. So, Ball, if you're listening out there by any chance, we just took like an 8-minute segment to give you much love. So much love to you, brother. Keep doing what you are doing. I'd love to have you on the show at some point. Your work is top-notch in my eyes.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. We love you.
We love you.
Thank you.
No, I'm a big firm believer that I love, there's so many occultists, I think, that are so tied up in their own illusion of themselves that they won't take the time to research, read, and practice anyone else's work. And I'm the complete opposite, where, like I said, I'm very, very capable and very confident in my own work, but I'm always like, well, what don't I know? What can I learn? I'm a junkie for magic, and I want to get all the drugs, folks. So I want to teach me what you know.
Somebody feed my addiction.
That's
I
it.
need to know all the things. Yes,
I need to know all the things. So no, that's great. Well, thank you for letting me jump into that completely side step there.
Totally, no problem.
So after you had found out about, obviously, the lady living in the house, and it's kind of led to other events in your life, what brought you to wanting to start to write? Was that always a plan of yours, as, you were planning on being a writer at some point, or how did that come about?
Well, I'm going to have to start with backing up just a little bit. So when I was 4 years old, you guys probably already know this story. I died when I was 4. When I died, I went into total, complete darkness. And that was the first time that I met the spirit that everybody more commonly knows as Belial, or Belial, as I call him. And he basically stayed with me pretty much after that. He's been a part of my life ever since, in an entire caveat of different ways, but always present, never that far away since that time. And then when I was, 15, he kind of guided me from the time I was very young. We were rescued from that situation, and the person that, hurt me back then, that person, ended up going to jail for a while, certainly not as long as he deserved, but he did go to jail. And then, throughout my childhood after that, there were certain, just paranormal experiences kept continuing, interactions with a spirit in my life that I met when I was dead, was now physically in front of me most of the time, especially at particular times of the day and night. as a child, I didn't really understand who he was or even what he was when I was young. Like, it was something that he kept hidden from me for, I'm sure he had his own reasons, but he didn't reveal himself until later in my life to actually say, this is who I am.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, as a child of 6 or 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, I can't imagine if a spirit that, you have a child that's been seeing dead people and suddenly you have a demon going, oh, this is who I am and this is my true face. I don't think I would have ever made it past, 10 years old seeing Belial's true face. He's kind of, his face can be a little bit freaky when you actually see it. So for a child, I think that would have been terrifying.
I would imagine.
Yeah. So after that, when I passed out in church that day, the other part of that story was that when I got home from school that afternoon, I went for a walk to try to bring myself back to center because I was feeling very just off and not quite, I almost felt like I was half in, half out, if that makes any sense. So I went for a walk down this nature path that was close to my house. And that's when a spirit that I knew of at that time, named Samael, decided to make themselves known. And basically what happened was I was walking past like this big willow tree, and then there was a lilac bush, right next to that on the path. And I began to see this, what I previously have described as, it almost looks like, how when you're playing a video game and like a water monster comes up out of the water and it's like see-through, but not really see-through, but it is see-through, like kind of transparent. Basically what I've been trying to describe is that there was a shimmer, and it was a spirit that kind of shimmered. And when I asked, who are you? He said his name. And that kind of freaked me out. I didn't really know what was going on because I was full Catholic at that point in my life. So then I go back to my house and I immediately talk to my mom about it. And my mom and I have had a weird relationship my whole life, basically. And I talked to her about it and I was like, what, do you know what this was? And she was like, well, yeah, feel lucky, that was the spirit of the air. And like, she was really happy about it. And I was like, okay. And the only confirmation that I could find, like, it was really confusing for me at that time. The only confirmation I could find of that was, I looked in the Bible and then I found the verse that was talking about the spirit of the air. And I was like, okay, well, that makes some sense. And that's basically the event that put me on my path. Like, I started searching from that point. Like, I have this entity who's been with me since I died, who was blacker than the blackest night you've ever seen in the place that I went. And now I have this other entity. I need to know who they are. I need to know what they are, and I need to know what they want. So I started researching everything that I could. That's when I started diving into books and reading things. And that's when I just started, journaling a lot of things, writing things down. And basically, as I went, the more I wrote, the more I realized how much I truly loved writing, how much I truly loved talking about these things, how much I truly loved rabbit holing, as I call it, which is, when you dig deep and go do a lot of research into a particular subject. And that's pretty much when my addiction started to the occult and to spiritual things. And I've been on this journey pretty much ever since.
It's interesting how when you do start digging into, like you called it, rabbit holing, it's almost like tunneling as well, because you go down one rabbit hole that you might come back out of and go down another one, and then 5 rabbit holes later you find a piece of information that connects to the first one, which connects to the third, and then you start to jump through them, and then you're like, oh shit, they're all connected. And you start to discover grand pictures from multiple things, and that's what I love about the secret hidden keys of magic is you go on any one of these Facebook groups or any, blog group out there, and people are like, give me the keys to magic. And I'm like, man, there's no way we even could, because you got to spend years of research in figuring out how to connect them, because not only would the words and verbiage not do it justice, it's something internal that can't be put to words. Right. And there is so much connection that you have to go through that, because that in itself of figuring out and being smart enough and clever enough to connect those dots is a small fraction of what spiritual alchemy actually is. And no one who just gets given the keys to the kingdom can understand that. And I came up with a good quote a little while back, and I said, I will never give the keys to the kingdom to those that grovel at its gates.
Yes.
And
I
that's,
love that.
And that's exactly how I feel, because constantly people message me and they're like, do this for me, or teach me the trick to do this overnight. I'm like, fucking teach yourself. Right. I'm like, if you're not worthy to teach yourself, then honestly, you should perish at the gates and I'll watch you burn. And I have no problem with that. I mean, maybe that's the Satanist in me, but I'm saying it is survival of the fittest, because you need to stand up for yourself. If you do not like the life that you have, if you do not like the things going on around you, then change the things that you are around. And people don't want to do that. They want to, drown in their own sorrow that they've created, and then they expect everyone else to just get them out of it. And I'm like, I'm not going to throw you a ladder. Build your own ladder and climb up out of it yourself, because the battle of doing so is what strengthens you and starts to put you in contact with these spirits and things. They don't want to work with the weak, folks. So whenever you're like, oh, I don't have the power to do this myself, well, then it isn't going to matter if I give you the keys, because these demons and spirits won't work with you anyway. They hate weakness.
Yes, they do.
They'll turn weakness into strength, but they won't ever help someone who wants to continue to be weak.
Right. And they will not, they will put up with a certain amount of, I feel sorry for myself kind of attitude. But, I mean, Lucifer, I don't know if you've ever worked with Lucifer specifically. I'm sure you have.
I have, yes.
He is one that will, for lack of a better word, smack that out of you rather quickly. There's some intolerance there, not just with him, but with many others, for people that grovel and just are self-pitying all the time. Like, you have to pick yourself up. You have to, ask them to show you the way, but don't sit there and cry, please help me. What do you can't act like a baby when you're trying to, excuse my French, become a god. Yes. Gods aren't babies, right?
Exactly.
You're not, this is not how it works. You have to step into your power, and you have to own it. You have to own your choices. You have to own your abilities, whether they suck or not. And if you need to hone your skills, you have to own that too and do the work to make that happen.
You do. And I mean, I think it falls back to people want to have accountability on everyone else but themselves. And I think that falls back to more of a Christian and Catholicism standpoint, where I want to pray to God to save me, but I'll also spit in the face of God and condemn him when he doesn't help me or something goes wrong. And I never understood that, because coming from a satanic, standpoint, to me it was always, I will change my own future and build the kingdom that I want. But if I fell along the route or along the road, I will blame no one but myself. That, you have to have accountability for all things, good and bad. It is you. It is 100% you. You can achieve and do anything you want to do, but you're going to fuck up along the way. And when you do, don't blame anyone else but yourself. You were the one that fucked up. So people need to take that into account, and it's okay to be weak. We've all been there. I certainly have been weak throughout my life in stages, but you have to have the willingness to say, I don't want to be weak anymore. Right. How can I change this? Teach teach me and show me the way, O great spirits, and work with them, and they will be the wind behind your sails. But if you say, I am just weak and I'm never going to be anything but weak, and please just make me rich and famous overnight and give me all the power, then you're going to be exactly tomorrow, next week, next month, and 5 years from now, exactly where you are now, bugging the shit out of all of us occultists out there that actually are making changes happen and saying, please just give me the keys. So, you know, that's something important out there, folks, is it's okay to be weak. Don't feel that you can't be. It's okay to be at rock bottom and feel like life has shit on you and you have nowhere else to go. But know that it wasn't life. It wasn't God. It was you. You were the reason you were at where you're at right now, no matter what the situation is. But you are also the person who can climb back out of it and change it into anything that you want to do. And there are some great spirits that will help you, but they don't give it to you. They want to see you work towards the goal, and they'll just speed its progression.
Right. And there's like, have you ever read any of Crowley's work?
As confusing as it is, yes.
Okay.
I'm one of those people that people like love Crowley, and I'm like, he's great. I'm like, but his shit is like, I have a hard time with it, and I've read it, and it is phenomenal. He's a genius in his own right, but I'm like, man, he made this way more confusing than it needed to be.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it up only because there's one piece of one of his books, and I forget which one it is now, but it's a phrase that's always and forever stuck with me. And what it says is, I am Belial. For having seen the rose upon thy breast, I have denied God.
Okay.
And the reason that I bring that up is to your point about weakness being associated with, you know, Christianity. For me, all of that is the false light. And I think that it feeds a mass idea of victimhood in people. And it makes it okay for them to, you know, blame maybe something that isn't to blame, you know, whether it be other people, whether it be some imaginary man in the sky, you know, or whether it be, you know, what the Christians refer to as Satan. It just is not, it's not going to help you. So denying that falseness is the thing that's going to begin helping you to pick yourself up and pull yourself out of whatever situation you might happen to be in. It gives a strength that almost feels as if you didn't, like, if you're at a point where you don't feel like you have any strength, and then you, and I did this myself at one point, which is why I'm talking about it. When you are at a point where you feel like you have no strength and you have nothing left, and then you engage in that utter denial, it lights something up inside of you that wasn't there before. And then the next thing you know, things are starting to happen and your life is shifting.
It's major shifts. I mean, yeah, you start to notice these shifts that all of a sudden you look back.
Significant.
And it's weird because you don't necessarily, I mean, you do notice it as it's happening, but you don't notice it as much as it's happening as you do in hindsight in small stages where you're like, wow, things seem to be going right lately. And then you look 3 weeks later and you're like, wow, over the last 3 weeks, shit's really been really good. And then you look, 6 weeks later and you're like, wow, the last 3 months have been pretty wild. And then 6 months later, you're like, wow, this has been the best year of my life. And it continues to happen because as long as you stay focused, as long as you start to put into motion your will of wanting to change, wanting to be stronger, no longer wanting to be weak, the gears start turning, the things start changing, and the world almost works for you.
Exactly. And and I guess I'm going to give a key, because there is a key. If change is what you want, the number one thing that anyone has to do is decide what they want. That's like the biggest hang up. Is what do you want? And like people that have come to me and they're like, well, can you teach me how to do this? And can you teach me how to, you know, write rituals or can you teach me how to do whatever it is or how to achieve this or how to do this? And I'm like, okay, well, we have to narrow it down a little bit. This is a pretty broad spectrum, is usually what comes into my email. What is it exactly that your goal is? What do you want to achieve by doing this? And when you start to narrow that field is when you start to see that, that indecisiveness of what do people actually want. If you can't decide what you actually want, you will never have what you dream about.
Agreed. I mean, that's the thing, is, and it's hard for a lot of us, even myself, I'll tell you, as an artist and as someone who's very passionate and always has projects. My wife has to put me in check from time to time because I'm someone who will want to be involved in a lot of things, and I do very well at a lot of things. So I don't take things on and do them shittily. I mean, when I take something on, I put my passion into it, and I can do 5-6 things at one time and do them justice, but I'm so spread thin that it obviously takes tolls in other ways, and I have those passions, but I had a while back an epiphany, and I just had to really changed life up. And that was, my fans and listeners probably have heard this before, is I had ran a nice sized company, a record label with a lot of different artists and models and a magazine and all kinds of stuff. And then one day, out of nowhere, shocking to everybody, I just said, I'm done. I'm handing the company over to one of my guys, and I'm finished. I don't want to make music anymore. I'm letting go of the 40 artists that I had on my label. I don't want to do the magazine. It's all gone. I don't even want money for it. Just take it. I'm done. And everyone's like, what the hell? And I says, I have spread myself among 20 things, and I am a jack of all trades, master of none. And I didn't want to be that anymore. It was great to be great at many things. Oh, you're great at this, you're great at that. But I'm like, but am I? But am I really? Because I'm not as great as I could be at any one of them if I gave it more focus.
Exactly.
And I had been an occultist for a very long time, and I said, you know what? I don't care to be known for music anymore. I don't care to be the guy that goes out and people come up and they're like, holy shit, man, it's you. I don't want to be that anymore. I want to disappear into the shadows and work 100% on myself, not work on an image of who I thought I was, but work on who I really am. And I started really doing that in the last few years, and it's been such a transformative experience that I've always been growing, but the amount of growth that I've seen has been, catapulted, tenfold. And it's as you said, Anassa, it's really just focusing on what do you want. And I decided a while back that I want to be a master occultist. I want to be an adept. And I mean, a lot of people call themselves adepts, and I find that hard to believe because there's a level, and I can say I'm very proficient, but I am nowhere near what I consider an adept.
I'm
true master and epistemists, where it's the level beyond that you don't know anybody by that title, because once they reach that title, they're no longer here.
Exactly.
And I'm like,
thank you for saying that. Thank you.
Exactly. So I'm like, it doesn't. You're not an adept. You believe you are, but as soon as you believe you are, that just means you're not. So, but that is where I wanted to put my focus at. Is I wanted to, first and foremost, spend more time with my family, not be dragged in so many directions. But the second thing is I wanted to spend as much possible time reading, researching, practicing, and ritualizing everything that I could to learn all facets that I could of magic and occultism. And like I said, I have always had success, but the successes over the last couple of years have been, just astounding, and I'm still nowhere near where I'm at. Most people would be happy at this stage. I'm one of those people that's never happy. I'm like, no, I need to be 15 stages above this.
Same. I am one of those people as well.
It's a blessing and a curse.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
It's like you're happy for 2 minutes. You're like, oh, great, I reached my goal. Now what's the next one?
Yep, exactly.
And that's where I'm at, is I feel like there's so much more to be learned, so much more to experiment with. I'm a very big experimenter. I like experimental magic, where I'll take processes and procedures, but then how can I change certain things to see how the results are? Are they going to be not as potent, or are they going to be 10 times more potent than the original practitioner made, and maybe they just didn't know? And I've done that with, the Goetia. I've done that with a lot of different works where I've had failures. Sure, I always have failures, but there's been things I've done that I'm like, holy shit, I don't know about the original writer of this book. I'm like, but I just experienced shit way beyond they were talking about. So it just depends, but I think that's a big thing.
Agreed. I think rules are meant to be broken in certain aspects, especially within the occult, you know. Some of the grandest occultists that we know, you know, I'm just going to go with Satanism here and call out, you know, Grant or Thelema and call out Crowley or anybody that's within the Golden Dawn or even modern day occultists. We, you know, none of us get where we are by not breaking the rules. We have to be rule breakers in order to, you know, hone our own practice. Like, we have little nuggets of things that work in every single book that we pick up. And any book, whether it's scholarly or otherwise, can be turned into something that you can use in your practice. There's always pieces of information that can be changed and used for what you want to use it for. But yeah, I absolutely agree. You have to break the rules.
Oh, I look for those points of power in every book where I don't expect to go into a book and it be gold the whole way through. Doesn't mean it's a bad book, but I look for 5 points of power. And when I say that, I look for 5 aha moments in every book I read that I'm like, if there's 5 times in this book that I'm like, oh shit, then it's a success for me. Then I'm like, man, this person crushed it. If there's only one thing, then I'm like, okay, it was still a good read, but did it really teach anything? You know, and I only look at it from my own point of view, but did it really teach me anything? I don't know, but it was still a good read. In some cases, sometimes it's not. But I look for those 5 things. But as you mentioned, if you are not raising the bar, you get crushed by the bar. And that's why you know of people like S.R. You know, I can't talk tonight. About Mathers, you know about Crawley, you know about Israel Regardie, you know about these different practitioners whose name stands out because they have pushed the limits. And, you know, talking about Crawley specifically, he was a bizarre cat who did a lot of wild shit, and he pushed the bar in a lot of ways. I mean, especially the legends of his abbey that he had and all the things that went on at that place, and him experimenting in wild, messed up ways. But you know what? In his own way, he was pushing the bar to see what successes and failures he could experience by trying things that hadn't been tried prior. And that's, I think, important to do in all of our you know, practices. I do a lot with mixing and mingling paranormal research, as I am a paranormal researcher, in with occultism, where I have been saying recently about using spirit boxes to communicate not with ghosts, but using it to communicate with demonic spirits specifically. And I've talked about different things of opening portals and things recently on one of my last episodes. It was either last one or one before that. But trying things that I don't know anybody else that's trying it, and hey, maybe I'll waste 50 hours of nothing, and that's okay because I have it logged and written down that, hey, I experimented. And any scientist, you know, that has done anything in life will tell you it's a lot of experiments, a lot of failures before you have that one success. And that's where I'm at, is I've had a lot of successes, but I'm looking for that one success where it just changes the game.
100% agree. I'm actually experimenting with magnetics.
Okay.
Towards detecting spirits. So there's this it's a I don't even know exactly, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a green film, or like a piece, it looks like a piece of paper, but it's magnetic. And basically what I'm doing with it is attempting to see with that magnetic sheet if there's any reaction on it during evocations or invocations or rituals indoors versus outdoors. There's been some pretty interesting results, that plus an EVP recorder. I don't know what other equipment you might use, but there's an EMF in there also to see if there's any registration with what's happening on that magnetic film, plus, you know, is the piece of equipment actually picking up any information. It's pretty fascinating.
You know, something you might want to look at, and I haven't experimented with it yet. There's too many experiments, not enough time. It's almost like we talked about prior to the show that, you know, for those listening out there, Anassa and myself are both huge fans of books and reading, and unfortunately with our libraries that we currently hold, we couldn't get through it in this lifetime and probably even the next, and there's always more books coming out. And I can't only speak for myself right now, but I'm guessing it's probably the same for you, that a new book will come out that just looks great. It just gives you that charge off it. You buy it, even though you can't even get to it anytime soon.
Yep.
You're like, I just keep buying more and more books. I don't know why I'm doing this. Sometimes I'll flip-flop books in and out, and I'll read a new one before I read 50 of the old ones I wanted to read, and vice versa. But it's a daily struggle. But one of the things I was going to mention is there's a device that I don't know anyone else, honestly, that uses them. I actually brought this up to a paranormal crew that I was with recently at an investigation I went and did with this other crew. And I asked them, hey, have you ever used a germanium diode? And they're like, I don't even know what the fuck you just said to me. And I'm like, you need to look into it. It's a device made by a German scientist who was experimenting heavily. Don't quote me on dates, folks. I think it was the early 1900s. And he was experimenting with a device to try to get 100% proven factual EVPs, where yes, you catch things on audio recorder that can't be explained. That's awesome, but does that mean it's a ghost? Not necessarily.
Right.
You use spirit boxes and you hear things, but I feel that the problem with spirit boxes is there's a lot of times it's subjective of what you want to hear. I've said many times, you have 5 people and someone, what's your name? It said Jennifer, and everyone's like, yes, it did. Meanwhile, it didn't. It just made a mumble sound. So I feel that there's room for error with these things, but the point of this device is it cuts out all ambient noise of all kinds. There's no speakers on it. There's no microphone. It is literally a metal diode. I got a double. There's different forms of them. I bought the double diode. It's supposed to be even more proficient, or efficient, I should say. And what it does is it records flatline. So if you put it in like the file, like if you took it plugs directly into your recorder, but then it cuts off the microphone of your recorder, and it picks up signal. So whenever you were to put the chip into the computer and listen, it would just be a flat line with absolutely no sound on it or nothing.
Wow.
But when a spirit does speak, it'll then give you a little blip on the audio file. So you could look at 50 minutes and have 2 blips on there, and you'd be like, wow, there's nothing on here. Those 2 blips will only happen and occur if something paranormal speaks to that device. It'll only pick up somehow with the way that it is made, spiritual contact, and then you have 100% pure EVPs. You don't have to siphon through all this extra ambient noise. Right there it is. It's just you'd have to look at the flat line, cut out the pieces. But it is something that was, good old-fashioned German Scientology. They've always were pretty goddamn smart. And and it's something that, like I said, I came across a while back. I have it. I've messed around a little bit with it in paranormal investigations, and I have been wanting to integrate it into my demonic summoning work of invocation and evocation to see if I can capture clear, blown, spiritual audio communication through that rather than my own ears. It just hasn't happened
I've been working. Yeah, I haven't been successful in capturing anything that I would consider a type A EVP yet. So, I captured some back in the day when I was engaging in like ghost hunting and things, but nothing recently with during the evocation experiments. I have gotten some interesting anomalies with the magnetic like sheets, that there's like an interruption that happens sometimes and this like literally like a sheet of paper, and like you create like a small wall with it, and then basically you can see shapes form whenever the energy around it gets disturbed.
That's interesting.
Yes.
I'm very intrigued. Please keep me posted on how your research goes with that. I love paranormal research of all kinds, so I definitely want to hear further about it.
I will. I'll send you a link to the magnetic paper also. It's not paper, paper, but it's some kind of magnetic sheet. I don't even remember what it's called.
And I'll do the same
really cool.
for the company that I bought the diode off. It's just one guy that makes them. I think in his shop, and then he sells them worldwide. I don't think there's a huge demand for germanium diodes right now, so I don't think he has to make a whole lot. But I'm one of those guys out there that has it. I was saying I think it was one of the last couple episodes. Like I said, I've been experimenting with trying to use the spirit box as a tool in my ritual ceremonies to open up a portal in the box itself, not to specific, spirits or entities, but to specific realms to hear the noise of that world. And I was explaining that I had a very interesting session that I had done where you could hear what I can only describe as some forms of animals almost.
Wow.
There was no talking, there was no voices, and I think it was my last episode. They start to blend together sometimes on specific questions and things, but I heard what only could be described as dinosaur or pterodactyl type sounds.
Wow.
But it was happening over and over again, and I'm standing in my temple, looking at this box, and I'm like, well, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen. I'm like, I'm literally hearing what sounds like different animals communicating with one another in some form of high-pitched dinosaur-type sounds. And I'm like, this is revolutionary right here. And I'm looking and working further with that, and I want to integrate with that the germanium diode, because my thinking is if I can continue to get results with that, sure, the ghost box is great, but then I can listen to that flat line of the germanium diode, and maybe we'll catch those animal sounds distinctively with no other noise. I don't know how it works. It somehow picks up ghosts. I don't know if it would pick up other dimensional beings. I'm not sure. It's like I said, it's something I'll have to experiment with, but it has been a passion project of mine.
I think that sounds incredible. I hope you're filming all of this.
I didn't film that, but I need to. I mean, it was like I said, I don't film a lot of my work. I know a lot of practitioners take pictures of their manifestations in smoke and a lot of different things to show. I'm not a big showy guy. There's a lot of people that know of my work and know that I'm obviously legit, but they're always like, why don't you make videos and post and pictures of your rituals? And I'm like, I don't know. It's a very private thing for me.
I mean, for
personal use.
Though,
yeah, I've been thinking
track
that.
Your progress.
Well, I've been thinking that. I keep journals on everything. I was always a big, write it down type guy, but lately I have been thinking I probably do need to take personal video. I have audio clips of certain things, but I need to take video for those purposes to go back to, because journals are nice, but it takes a long time to read them.
It does, and if you end up cracking it open and making an amazing discovery, I mean, what you've already been doing sounds incredible. But if you actually have that on raw video that's unedited, I mean, what kind of better evidence do you need than that?
It'd be like one of those horror found footage films. It'll be like, we found his camera and we watched it. We've never seen him again, but when we listened, he manifested a pterodactyl in his altar. Or
you'll be like that guy who wrote all the symbols and equations on his walls in his bedroom and just disappeared and no one ever saw him again.
So I have read a little bit into opening wormholes. I mean, so I feel the wormholes and portals are a little bit different than one another. I mean, portals, I think we can open up as forms of just communicating and bringing things through, but wormholes are like a roller coaster ride into different dimensions. And I'm a firm believer that is not only a real thing, but you can figure out how to crack the code. I have read about that and researched a little bit. It's a heavy topic, though.
It is. But yeah, I have to.
I think it's pretty fascinating, though. There was, and I can't think of where, but in the desert somewhere, quite a while back in history, there was a golden disc dropped from the heavens that they said was given from the gods, and it just so happened to perfectly fit this square cutout in the side of this mountain in some country. I can't remember what country it is, but you could Google it. I'm sure everybody could find it. And he was a shaman, and the other shaman priests watched him walk up to the wall. He stuck the gold disc in, he turned it, and then all of a sudden just vanished before all of their eyes and was never seen again. And this is a famous story of wormholes and of some golden disc that was dropped from the skies. I know a lot of people said that they thought it, from the original accounts, thought it was God, or there was different things. I'm thinking it was probably more alienistic of some sort, but it's a very interesting story on wormholes. And that was actually when I heard that many years ago. I'm like, I need to figure out how the hell that works. I always try to get myself in stuff I really probably shouldn't be involved in.
Yeah, I mean, that's where you find that you're going to break the rules, and that's where all the major discoveries happen. I mean, go for it. Absolutely.
Once again, raise the bar.
Exactly. Just document it as you're moving on. Like, I didn't come up with, but I was given some UPG back in November that I've been slowly working with. Basically what it says is non-symmetrical and non-circular symbols represent stargates, and symmetrical symbols represent potential earth gates, like different portals to different places. This was just something that came to me during meditation. I have no way of knowing if it's actually true. I haven't attempted to experiment with any of it, but I thought it was fascinating. And basically what it goes into is, decoding sigils and determining what the frequency of the sigil is, and then using the frequency of sound to open the actual portal.
Well, frequency of sound, frequency is everything, but frequency of sound is, folks, we're giving too many keys away tonight, but frequency of sound.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Here we go.
Frequency of sound is really the ultimate key, and that's why when working with a lot of forces, angelic being one of them, if you resonate their names and their calls in the proper way at the proper frequencies, mind-altering things will happen. And it's the same thing with working with demonic spirits also, that hitting the frequency opens the gates themselves. And as you said, everything has frequency. Everything has vibration. It don't matter if it is a pebble, a giant boulder, a bird, water. Yes. It all has frequencies. And when you can learn to attune your personal frequency to the frequency of what it is you want to come into contact with, you will have clear-cut communication. So if you find it to be an occult symbol, a obscure symbol that you don't really understand, if you meditate and resonate on that and you can match your frequencies with it, not only will you maybe find out what it means, but you might actually be able to use that symbol to launch yourself into other places.
Exactly. And if you match the frequency of the things that you place around you, here's another, I'm giving something else away. If you figure out what frequency of items you need to have around you that are going to be, that are going to match the frequency you need to set within yourself, you can create a space within a space, essentially.
Absolutely. I'm a big crystal guy. I have gemstones and crystals everywhere. I've always had since a kid. It actually added up. When I was a little kid, I always loved gemstones. I mean, other kids were playing with toys, and I was like, Mom, I want gemstones. Keep buying me gemstones. And I had all these bags of gemstones, and I never knew why as a kid I loved them. I just loved them. And as I got older, it mixed with so many other things that I was into. And I looked back in hindsight at one point, and I'm like, man, I've been an occultist since day one. I'm like, I just didn't know it. Yes. I had no idea. But I love tuning myself to the frequencies during meditation of different type of mineral stones. Same thing with plants. If you tune yourself to plants, or you do any type of poison path magic workings, and you start to use plant guides and things of that nature, it is amazing. People only ever think that, you have to work with entities and spirits of demons or angels or this or that or the dead. No, folks, you can actually communicate heavily with minerals, plants, and many other things as well. So think bigger.
You just have to wake them up.
You just got to wake them up. They're sleepy.
The way that I wake them up is to whisper to them. If you start whispering, and then it goes back to the whole theory of breath and magic, and that magic is within the breath. I don't know if you've ever heard that theory.
Breath's everything. I mean, honestly, my practice would be nothing without breath work. As honestly, I think I mean, you can have success without the breath work, but learning to control your breath, breathe in certain patterns, certain lengths, certain holding patterns, you can truly learn to direct the energy and use metaphysical energy as a weapon and as a tool. And that's how you're going to truly awaken and raise the Kundalini serpent. I mean, if you really want to open the pineal gland and the third eye, you need to learn to direct your energy, and you do so by controlling the breath.
Right.
It's an amazing thing. So yeah, you got to wait. I talk to plants all the time. I mean, I don't care if I look
Me
crazy,
too.
but like if I'm gonna pick a flower for my wife, I have to see a beautiful wildflower. I'm gonna go over and talk to it and ask it if it is okay that I pick it and give this to my wife, if it would be okay to be a gift for her. And I wait to hear the answer. And if I feel that, wait, no, it doesn't want me to pick it, then I'm not picking it. And some people will be like, man, you were out there. But you know what? I connect with the things that I work with.
Right. And it's basic animism. It's the basic belief that there is an indwelling spirit in everything. And it's not the same spirit, but that every single thing has an indwelling spirit.
It does. I mean, everything's deceiving. I mean, think of the fact that the chair you're sitting on right now isn't even solid. You're floating in air.
Exactly.
When you think of that, everything's organisms. Everything is different cells and things that come together, and we're all the same, whether it's us or not. We just think that we're different because we think we're intelligent, but honestly, we're not as intelligent as as some other things out there. So, real quick, I want to take a commercial break real quick before we get too carried away here, and give a shout out to my 3 sponsors. And first and foremost tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we will go into Goetic Impressions, which formed as a partnership between Ben, who is Frater Adamastor, and Sor Alara, with the intention to bring ritual, accurate magical tools to the public for affordable prices. One of the largest barriers to entry for new practitioners looking to experiment with the magic of the Western grimoires is how expensive and difficult to find real ritual tools are. They first launched with a Kickstarter to bring their Goetic medallions to life, and since then have also expanded with an Enochian tool set, and most recently with a Satanic medallion and altar set, which is currently live on Kickstarter. With over 20 years of magical and occult experience across a range of traditions, Goetic Impressions is the place to find affordable, high-quality ritual items. You can check them out at goeticimpressions.com. Again, that is goeticimpressions.com. If you are looking for a nice promo code to get 10% off of your overall order, or even a single item, I make you work for it. So you got to like the Knights of the Nephilim page. You got to give us a follow here on one of the radio platforms that you're listening to us from. And you also have to check out Anassa, her newest book and a page, and make sure you're following her as well. I always want to make sure that you are supporting the people you're listening to on the show, and then we get you some good hookups on some purchasing. So make sure you check them out. They have an amazing array of, just tools, altar cloths, candles, you name it, they have it. Next to me, I'm in my temple right now, is actually where I have my radio set up, and I have several of their items. I love them. I use them. So it's a great company. Make sure you check them out. The next one is going to be James Hunter Ralston, who also goes by the Telemancer. And he has been a member of the Order of the Voltex starting in 2008 and progressing through several degrees, and last serving as the head of the Outer Order. The Order of the Voltec is an offshoot of a pylon of the Temple of Set, originated to study and practice several forms of the sorceress methods centered on techniques used by Mexican and other Central American priests and magicians. Many of the techniques involved were popularized in late 1970s and 80s by Carlos Castaneda, who's one of my personal favorite authors of all time. He, over the decades since his first experience with magic, his desire has grown into the creation and use of what other shamanic sorcerers term as power objects, talismans, amulets, totems, and other powerful objects. His interest expanded to the degree that he chose to become an apprentice of several Appalachia's premier craftspeople and learn the art of metalcraft to produce power objects for both himself and select patrons. He has been making talismanic metalworking for over 8 years. He works in silver, gold, and pewter for the most part, but sometimes will work with other metals occasionally. He creates talismanic pendants, rings, and altarpieces. Everything or almost everything is exclusively custom commission, and you can check him out at facebook.com/thetelemancer, followed by the number 1. And again, that's facebook.com/thetelemancer, and then the number 1. Amazing, beautiful metalworking, honestly top-notch in the game. I think he's up there with the absolute best. So make sure you check him out and support him. And then last but not least, we have Limitless Liberation, and I always read this from the point of view of their owner, which is Elena, and she says, Limitless Liberation was inspired by both Lucifer and Belial. Lucifer has been with me most of my life, as far back as I can remember. And we'll switch up the name, it's just easier to say. Belial I started working with when I was going through a very difficult part of my life. He completely turned mine and my family's life around for the better in a very short period of time. In return, he asked me to create charger for him. He showed me the designs, so I created the first charger for Belial, and Lucifer wanted one next. From there, I had spirits lining up with requests for magical items. Some are control freaks, while others just inspire. They are all so individually different, but every single item created has power within it. Each item operates on many levels. They operate as an anchor for the spirit you are working with, aiding easier connection between the two of you. They also operate like a power cell or battery, where they already come with an inherent energy to them, but they become stronger as you feed them and pull from them during ritual, as well as to strengthen your workings. Limitless Liberation continues to grow to honor the spirits we love to work and build relationships with. And you can check out her work at etsy.com/shop/Limitless Liberation. And again, that's etsy.com/shop/Limitless Liberation. All three of these companies are phenomenal and top of the game at what they do. I am very excited to have them as sponsors of the show and want to thank all three of them for everything that they do for myself and the show. Make sure you check them out. Pick up something for yourself or for a fellow practitioner. It's always a nice gift. So, folks, we have been hanging out for the last hour and 10 minutes with Anassa Rose, talking about who she is, how she came to be the practitioner she is currently today, different items and topics and discussions that we've had fun talking about tonight. But for the last 20 minutes of this show, I want to talk about the work that she has released. She currently has one book in the market that had hit a pretty nice status. It became number 1 in the spiritual section of Amazon within its first 3 weeks of being out, which is pretty impressive. And she has a second book that she's currently working on at the time being, and we're going to talk about both. So first and foremost, talking about her most recent work, or past current work, I should say, it's the 10 most important laws for successful magic, which dropped in 2017. Anassa, can you tell us a little bit about this book, what readers can expect from this book, and where they can check that out at?
Sure. Absolutely. So it's pretty easy. If you just go to Amazon, you can find it. The Kindle edition, I have it priced only at, I think, 99 cents for the Kindle download. And that's because the book is only, I think, 37 pages total. So it doesn't give you a lot of information, but there are some really good keys and nuggets of information in that book that will help you bring some clarity to things that might be happening in your life that maybe you don't recognize. For instance, how powerful of a creator you might be, and how your words and actions and your mental state can influence your reality. So that's what this book essentially does, is it brings you into awareness of how you are affecting yourself and your life.
It's a beautiful thing, and sometimes, you don't need an overly long book to teach you things. Sometimes, as you said, 37 pages or whatever this book might be is enough to give you the fruits that you need to go forward. Because sometimes books are just too goddamn long, folks. I mean, sometimes you read books and you're like, wow, I just read 600 pages, and there was about 5 pages of actual valuable information. And that's not all books, but there are some. I mean, even some of the classics that I love reading, like the 3 books of occult philosophy by Agrippa, great book, but fuck is it long. And it's detailed, and it's so thick of a read, and you're like, man, I'm 25 pages in and my head's spinning. Do you need to give me all this? Sometimes it's nice to have something that is shorter, that's more to the point, that says you don't have to read 25 paragraphs to get 1 paragraph of valuable info. It doesn't need to be hidden in such obscurity. Here it is.
Exactly.
And that's nice.
Yes, 100%.
And it hit, pretty nice status within the first 3 weeks. But I would only imagine that was a very exciting, thing to see.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked when I received that notification from Amazon that it was #1 in the spiritual reference category. I wasn't expecting anybody to ever see it when I wrote it. So I was, pretty shocked by that. But it was very cool nonetheless. So the fact that it's still selling and people are still buying it makes me happy, and it's still helping people, and most of the reviews are 5 stars. So I'll take it.
No, that's
Absolutely.
awesome. And I would only imagine that because of its success and because of the love shown by patrons who have picked it up and bought it, read it, and have used it, that is what, inspired you to write the current book that you have written that is hopefully soon to be released.
Well, the inspiration for both have actually been Hecate herself. The first book was definitely inspired by her, and this one is a work of devotion that I have basically written for her, about her, and to her. Essentially, that will be released to the public as soon as I find a publisher that is willing to work with me specifically on the cover, the way that I want it to be, and the size of the book, the way that I want the size of the book to be. Because it's 326 pages, 8.5 by 11. So if I cut that down to the size of a normal book, it's going to be somewhere over 600 pages.
That's a nice size book, though. I like that. You went from one extreme to the other. You said, I'm going to give you those little bit of nuggets on my first book, but then the second one, I'm going to hammer you with one of the larger books. But that's great.
Yes.
And you told me earlier, and I kind of knew that from what I've seen in the past, but you said the name of this book is going to be Liber Hecate. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. I'm
very excited to look forward to that. I think most of my listeners out there most people that know me know that I am a Hecatean sorcerer. That is my daily and main practice. I work with a lot of entities and spirits, but my absolute every single day of life is working with Hecate. In fact, 2 feet to my left, I have a beautiful Hecatean altar. So,
so do I.
And I got to actually take her offerings away. I got a whole slew of eggs here, some avocados, candle, and some whiskey poured out for her. So we got quite a little feast over here. I miss Dipnon, and I wanted to make sure that I made up for it because the last couple weeks have been insanity. So I had to do a nice feast. But no, that is great. I'm very excited to see the release of that book. I am very excited to read that book. And I'm sure there's a lot of others out there listening in right now that are very excited as well.
Yes, and to everyone who's listening, my apologies for the delay. Maybe I need to be less picky about the publisher, but that's pretty much where I am. Is I just need to decide, like I said before, and pick one and go with it. And let it go the way that it's supposed to, because it's her book, so it's going to go the way that she wants it to go anyway.
So with you saying that it's around 300 pages, 8 by 11, to me that makes me automatically think almost like a manuscript rather than a traditional book, and I kind of like that, though, where it's like you found what is almost resemblant of a journal, but it's not a journal.
No, it's not a journal. It has the rituals that she has taught me over the years. It has some UPG in it. It has some historical information. It has scholarly references. It has... there's a lot of other information. There's specific information about her being quad instead of triple, which is not something that you hear many people talking about. But there is reference to that in some of the old tablets that have been found, where she has 4 heads and all 4 of them are animal heads, and at least one of the male and at least one of the heads on that old tablet is actually male. Sometimes 2 of them are male.
No, I have certainly read and seen different portrayals of, in history of Hecate having animal heads as well. No, I personally myself have not experienced that side of her. Not to say that it won't happen, but that's awesome. I love that, and I love the fact that, as you said, it's almost truly, Liber Hecate, it's almost truly a Hecatean grimoire of self that you have produced. And that's why I like you said, the 8.5 by 11 makes me think of that. It makes me think of someone's private grimoire that they've written, but now released to the masses, and I like that.
Yeah, it was originally going to be handwritten, and I do have copies of all of the rituals and everything that's in it that I did write myself, by hand, but I'm going to keep the handwritten information for myself. Maybe I'll release a copy of that at one point. But I can't write 326 pages over and over and over again, right?
Yeah,
and I wouldn't. Yeah, I would not feel that it was authentic if it was a simple, photocopy, and I promised that it was going to be handwritten each time. So I just decided to go with more traditional publishing method, but the binding and the cover is what is the most important to me, along with the way that everything is set up inside, because the paper needs to be fine parchment, not cheap printer paper kind of thing. Almost like a linen parchment is what I want, like a traditional type of paper. So that's, kind of where I am. Like, I want to make sure that she's completely honored by this, and it's not cheaply done or commercially produced. That's my goal. You want it to really resonate with people, where it really has a feel to it. Like you said, there's something to be said about a fine quality paper. Yes. And if you have a very nice cover done properly, the layout and format is done very neatly and nicely, it has a certain feel to it, and then you feel the paper and it has that really nice quality feel to it. Absolutely. That in itself gives off a magical feel, and then obviously the words behind it back it up and strengthen it. So I look forward to the release of this. I hope it comes together as you hope it does. I know it can be hard with a publisher to find the right one, and to find one that doesn't want to completely cut corners and change things of it for their purposes. Right. But, it's one of those things that it'll come when it's supposed to, and it comes in the oddest of ways. Exactly. Yes.
You'll turn a corner and bump into someone randomly on the street and just start talking, and then it'll happen to be that they're a publisher or their best friend is, and it'll be the one. It's always something strange that you're like, where the hell did that come from? And that's the way it's supposed to happen, and I think that happens for a reason. That's placed into our life. Yep. So she'll put you in tune with where you need to be when the right time is. It just might not be the right time yet.
I absolutely agree. It'll be released completely within, when she's ready for it to be released, it will be released. And as long as I keep running into, little obstacles, it's not ready to be released yet. So I'm just going with that, and we'll get it out as soon as it's ready to go.
Now, with that being said, obviously we know that's an upcoming release. Is there any plans, and I know I'm shooting a little bit ahead, but is there any plans after Liber Hecate that you might be writing any other books or any other ideas that you're pondering right now, or is that a secret at the current time?
I actually have 3 other books that I'm currently working on. One I started before Hecate's book, and that I may release that as a paperback kind of primer to Hecate's book. And that one would be called Sensing Energy. And basically what it is a training manual to help people be able to recognize when there's something in the room with them, to be able to recognize spiritual energy, and to be able to recognize the energy of, even living people and living beings when they're not looking at them. So it's not a book that's meant to be read cover to cover. It's a book that is meant to put you through physical training, to train yourself, to train your mind, to train your senses on how to feel when you cut certain parts of your sensory off. So it engages with certain aspects of sensory deprivation to heighten awareness instead of just focusing on meditation and things like that.
Well, it's very important, and I think it's things that a lot of people out there should practice, because to fine-tune these capabilities, some people just have it, and that's great for those that do, but most do not, and it's not something you're just going to wake up one day and have, or that some entity's just going to give you. It is very much work, and we live in an age where people don't want to work, and are like, well, this isn't fun. Well, to have fun, you got to go through hell, and you got to work day in and day out at fine-tuning your skills of clairaudience, clairsentience, and clairvoyance, to use energy manipulation, the breathing that we talked about earlier. Breath work training is absolutely brutal.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're like, I'm getting tired of trying to breathe like this. I'm getting lightheaded. This isn't even fun. I just want to summon a demon, and I can't do it right now. And you get to be like a little kid stomping your feet up the stairs. Yeah, you're like, grr, this isn't any fun for me. And it's like, but if you just spend the time through spiritual boot camp and get your mind where you need to be and make these things second nature, then you can go the rest of your life having profound experiences. But if you only want to drag your feet day in and day out, 5 years from now, you still haven't reached the zenith of where you could be. And sensing energy is important, because so many times I've gone on paranormal investigations even, and someone's like, I don't think anything's here. I haven't experienced a damn thing. I'm like, bro, you're getting ghost fucked right now as we're talking.
You don't feel it.
And you don't even feel it. I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, like, and it's one of those things that if you knew how to pick up on the senses that are around you or that you have within you, you can experience the things around you much more profoundly. And that's important. Is when I go to a building, a lot of times I'll walk through the building and do a full sweep through once or twice. And then whether I'm solo, which I do a lot of, or if I'm with another group or other people, I'll say, we need to go to that room or that side of the building. Why is that? I'm like, trust me. I'm like, this is where it's happening right now. And we always have amazing experiences, because I have done the work to know how to pick up on the feelings. But so many can walk right through the most active room in a building and not know a single thing is going on right now. And it's just because they don't want to put in the work, because it's not fun to work.
Exactly. And the book that will be coming out for Akate whenever she's ready, Sensing Energy, I think I likely will release it as a primer, because most of the rituals that are in this book that she's worked with me on and that I've, worked myself, and they have to do with possession. One of the big ones is called the Hall of Mirrors. So, and that's an outdoors ritual, and there's multiple mirrors, 4 of them involved, which form the Black Cross, and there's specific invocations and chants and things that you need to say at each point during that specific ritual. And what you receive during that ritual is, only what you're going to be able to feel. The same entities are going to show up each time, but if you can't feel them, you're not going to know whether or not it's doing anything for you. And there are many rites that are similar to that. And I mean, this is where we kind of get into like the woo and like this might be a little bit scary for some people. But when you're working with Akate, she's, you're working with death energy, you're working with necromancy, you're working with underworld type of things and all manner of different spirits. So, I mean, you're going to get into things that, are a bit freaky.
And I love it.
Me too. Exactly.
It's so the greatest. She's very versed. She has many things under her wing, that's... I mean, it makes sense. Obviously, she is the queen of sorcery and magic and of witches. So, I mean, there's not just one end. There's so much that she can teach. And, I mean, as you said, energy feeling of energy and some rituals of just being the feeling. It isn't necessarily gnosis of knowledge given to you. It's the feeling that can change things. If you don't have the senses to feel it, you're going to miss out on a hell of a lot. So
exactly. And if you can't feel it, then you're not going to know if you should engage with something or not. Right? And
exactly.
If you can't feel it, how do you know if you're talking to yourself? You don't.
I do spend a lot of time talking to myself, though.
I think all of us do to a certain extent. Everybody does that. And they say the most highly intelligent people actually talk to themselves. So,
well, I'm a genius, folks. Well, no, I'm excited. So we obviously know about those two books. Before we finish out, do you want to tell us about the other two that you're working on?
The other one is for Valak, Volok. Everyone knows him as that. And then I'll be writing, after his book is done, I'll be writing a book that is a mix. And it's very important that I do this one that is a mix of Akate and Belial or Belial. Because those two always come together. At least for me and a couple of other people. They always come together. There's no Akate without Belial.
Well, that's a lot of really good information that you got coming out. I'm very excited for all of them. I've worked with all of the forces you have mentioned. I actually just got done doing a pretty extensive 2-week period of Volok, nightly for 2 weeks straight. There was a lot of crazy energies going on during those 2 weeks.
Yes, he is chaotic energy, but he's incredible. I absolutely love him.
I kind of went deep there for a while, and I had to back off because I was doing 1 to 2 week back to back intensive path workings with multiple demonic spirits, and it was. It started to be like, I don't know which one's helping me with what. A lot of great things were happening, but I'm like, man, there's a lot of craziness going on right now. Because I worked with Vapula, Volok, and who else did I work with during that time period? Adramalic, I think I worked with. I work with so many that it honestly blended together, but it was like back to back to back, and crazy stuff just was happening. And I know that during his 2 weeks, there was a lot of really wild energy that I was really digging and picking up on. So it was a good time for me. So I'm very excited for all the upcoming books you got me. I'll be buying them, sticking them on the heaps of 5,000 other books that I hope someday to get through. But I'll probably push them up the list a little bit. There's a lot of old books, old manuscripts that I have that they're always hard reads too. I have a lot of really ancient grimoires that I want to someday get through all of them, but I'm like, you have to be vested into that. You have to really want to sit down and read it because it's so damn hard to read that, it might take you 20 minutes to read 5 pages.
100%. When you get into like the Old English and the old way of the other languages that they might be written in and having to translate, absolutely. Totally feel you on that.
It's brutal. I mean, it's a passion of love. So,
for sure.
Well, perfect. Well, listen, we're going to be wrapping up for the evening, but is there anything else that you would like to tell us before closing out for the night? Anyone you would like to thank, and any advice that you would like to give to someone out there starting out in the field?
So I'd like to give a big shout out to all the members of my Spirits of the Rose Facebook group, all the people that, hang out with me on YouTube and Facebook, and all the people that support me on a regular basis. I really appreciate all of you, and I love you all. As far as advice starting out, what I would say is question things, question everything, and keep a journal. Because when you go back a couple of years and read a journal, and for instance, if it's something as simple as a dream journal, and you write down an interpretation of a dream, when you go back and look at that a couple of years later, you just might find that your interpretation was spot on, and that interpretation leads you to a completely new piece of gnosis that you were looking for in the present, but you had to go back to get. So keep a journal, question everything, and have fun.
I think those are solid points right there, and the journal is very important to go back and reflect on and find things that you definitely nailed, things that you were completely wrong on, and you're like, wow, I'm an idiot. And everything in between. It's important. I have several journals. It gets to be a little confusing. I would say keep one or two. Don't be like me and have like 6.
Right.
Keep
as many as you think you're necessary.
Yeah. Don't overdo it, folks, but keep as many as you think are necessary. Yeah. So let me tell you guys and gals out there about our next upcoming guests, and then we will go ahead and close out for the evening. So we have next week, let me take a look here. We have Jennifer Vatsa, and she is the owner of Belladonna's Botanicals. So we are going to be, I'm very excited for this one. We're going to be talking about the poison path, which is something I'm adamant about, and talking about plant magic and baneful, plants and oils and olums and all the different things of that side of it that is not so looked at these days by a lot of practitioners, but is very potent and powerful within itself. And then 2 weeks later, so I'll give you the dates on this, folks. Let me pull up a calendar real quick. I apologize. Right now, that would be I'll correct myself. Just keep a look on my Knights of the Nephilim page in case I'm wrong on this, because I actually have a few different things I'm going to announce here in a second. It should be next week is that one, and then 2 weeks later, which would be the 15th of April, I am bringing on a gentleman by the name of Mike Herring. Now, Michael Herring is very interesting. He's an occultist, he's a spiritualist, but the reason I say he's interesting is the guy hasn't blinked in years. If you go to him on Facebook, his title on Facebook is The Enlightened One Doesn't Blink an Eye. And he has told me he doesn't blink. He has found through his workings that blinking is something that we all do, but isn't actually even needed to happen, that it's a waste of time, and that you can reach levels where you no longer need to blink your eyes. Now, you might ask, why would you want to do that? Well, he's going to explain that on that show. So it's very interesting. I'm excited. It's definitely out there. It's something I don't know much about personally myself, and we're going to talk about a lot of great content. But that's the next 2 shows. But one of the things I wanted to mention is I am switching up the order of how the shows are currently running. Right now, I've been doing 3 Thursdays a month on Knights of the Nephilim. We are going to go to every other week, and then in the weeks in between, my other show, which is Celestial Oddities Pair of Normal Guys, is going to be taking on Thursdays as well. So, for instance, next week, we're going to be starting this next month. So next week would be Knights of the Nephilim, the following week Celestial Oddities, following week Knights of the Nephilim, and so forth. So we will be strictly airing on Thursday nights now. It'll make everything clean and concise for everyone. You'll know that every other week is an episode of KOTN, and every other week is an episode of Celestial Oddities. So hopefully that makes it simple for everybody. It's not so chaotic. It's not so all over the place. We have a massive amount of great content, interviews, topics, discussions, and everything in between coming up for you. So make sure you click the like, share, and follow button. If you have any suggestions, anything you want to see, anything you want to see us not do, or in between, hit us up at celestialoddities@gmail.com. Again, that's celestialoddities@gmail.com. You can also send us a message of Knights of the Nephilim podcast page on Facebook, or personally message me on my personal page at Freighter Crow on Facebook. Other than that, folks, I do want to thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight. Make sure if you didn't get the whole episode tonight, that you tune back from the beginning and listen to the whole thing. It was a great one. Make sure you jump through our past episodes as well. There's a lot of great interviews out there. And other than that, all I can say is, Anassa, thank you so much for coming on tonight, and thank you for your great conversations and knowledge.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and have a great night, all.
Absolutely, guys. We'll catch you next time on Knights of the Nephilim podcast. Have a good one.